welcome into the Just Basketball Show for August 7th. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and hit subscribe on our YouTube channel, the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel as well. And give us 5 stars, hit the notification bell, support the show that way. Thanks again to Dylan Heiser for his awesome work on production. Want to tell you, too, about our friends at Homage. Homage is the ultra comfortable specialty apparel company that uses vintage-inspired design to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. They offer a range of official licenses, including the NBA, the NFL, WNBA, and more, as well as hundreds of other unique lifestyle and pop culture designs. They're not just another fan t-shirt company. They craft the softest, most nostalgic clothing for sports fans, pop culture aficionados, and everybody in between. Click the link below. Buy yourself something nice. Maybe a nice WNBA shirt for the stretch season run, and some of that money comes back to support us. Brendon and I are both wearing shirts. I have my New York Liberty tee. He's got his Jimmy Butler Lasso tee, a shirt I also own, thanks to our friends at Homage. Go get yourself a Jimmy Butler tee. It's a pretty good shirt.
Pretty good shirt. Combines.
Pretty great shirt. Yeah.
Did you see Jimmy Butler in China? Did you see the crowd that he drew?
Insane.
Better than Miami's ever done for. Maybe he's headed to Shanghai.
Hey! Oh, wow. Just throwing darts at the city of Miami before we even get into this pod. Not here to talk about the city of Miami. We're here to talk about Destination NBA, a G League Odyssey, a new documentary that comes out on August 8th on Prime Video. Later in the show, we have interviews with the co-directors of the show, Bryant Robinson and Liam Hughes. They were kind enough to talk to us about the process of making it, talked about how you make something like that, the various stories blended in this. It's produced in conjunction with The Ringer and Religion of Sport, and airs on Prime. So, Brendon, we'll have the full interview with them obviously coming up later. What did you think of this documentary, this look inside the G League?
I liked it a lot. It made me think of our conversation about quarterback and making an NBA version, because they very much took that same model, which I think is really effective and good, of people at various stages of their pro journeys in basketball, in this case, crossing through the G League at some point in that. But they just multiplied it out by even more, and they had more than just 3 characters. They had guys who are alumni of the league, whether that's Jalen Green, who passed through Ignite, or guys like Gary Payton, who spent, a lot of time trying to fight through to really show what can happen. So I just thought they painted a really cool picture of what this league means, because it's unique. And we talk about it a little bit in the interview, but this is not like the minor leagues in baseball. It's not like you get drafted and you just kind of progress through and you're eventually destined to be a star in your organization. It's much more of a waypoint. And I think the way that they made the movie really illustrates that, and they got awesome stuff from the guys that details what that's like to go through.
I agree. I think this is one of the best ways I've seen the G League explained. I've covering some G League stuff, talking to people that run the Cleveland Charge, and kind of how bare bones some of these organizations can be to compare to their NBA counterparts. It's a whole different world down there. It's a whole different cast of characters down there. It is more chaotic at times. And I think Waypoint, Brendon, is a really good way to describe, I think, the people that often end up in the G League. Scoot Henderson, Scoot Henderson, you have Mason Jones, you mentioned Gary Payton II. You have this cast of characters that are all in different phases of their life, all kind of converging in this one place. And it's the kind of thing where I think you could do something like this almost every year now with Ignite. You mentioned this in the interview. Amoni Bates is going to be in the G League this year. That's someone that would absolutely, I think, make fascinating to watch for a year in that way. There's other guys on 2-ways around the league and now that there's 3 2-ways, you could do something with. Even if it's just a 2-way specific documentary, I think you could do something really interesting just on that. This is the part of the league that has the proximity, but guys that are still very much chasing something, even more pressure, even more uncertainty, than the 15th guy on a roster, right? Because they're playing in Sioux Falls and at the Wolstein Center in Cleveland, which is down the street from Rocket Mortgage. They used to play in Canton, or they're playing in these or they're playing in a team's practice facility despite being a professional, right? It's a very weird part of this.
That's what was crazy to me and is crazy to me about the G League is it's theoretically this much more prestigious opportunity. Like we talk about the competitiveness being probably better than any European league, although I know people can argue that, but definitely better than college basketball. And yet the glamour of it is almost zero. You know, they're maybe making more money than they could elsewhere, but even in some cases, not really. And I believe, I don't remember which character in the movie it is who says that he turned down an opportunity to play in Spain in order to give it a go. And it's like this tantalizing thing where you feel like it's this next step toward the NBA, but it can be like incredibly frustrating for it not to be. Was there, what speaking of characters, was there one that jumped out to you that you liked the most or
Scoot,
felt the most connected
Scoot.
to Scoot?
I am look, that's the obvious answer. I know he's kind of the name of this documentary, so to speak. But how could you not be drawn to Scoot? How can you not be drawn into what this guy is, the confidence he exudes, his story, his physicality at his age? To me, it is him, the one I like. Honestly, Brendan, this was, if they in 5 years come back when he's made some All-Star teams or something and like patched together part of this footage into footage that they've captured the next 5 years and did a Scoot documentary, this could clearly just be like part one of an amazing Scoot documentary. And this documentary just furthers my belief that I just am all in on what Scoot is going to be as a person and as a lightning rod for Portland.
I loved the family stuff that they got with him, and the moment where he's at the kitchen table watching the Russell Westbrook highlights, and his mom's like, "Oh, what's that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Russell Westbrook." And she's like, "Okay, but like, what is that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just me watching him. Like that's all that's like it." I know we've talked around the fact that I know him or have met him and been around him a little bit. But one of the times that he came to town and was working with our group at my day job was to go to opening night Suns Mavericks last year, and watching that thing of him with Russ at the kitchen table, like he watched warm-ups from the little suite that the NBA bought out for these G League guys, these Ignite guys, like it was school, like it was a study plan for a test. Like that feels genuine, and the personality stuff does too. Like he took the time to ask us about our boring ass university jobs when he was 17. When we met him last year in his first season there, he came up to us and wanted to hear about all the different things we did and whatever. So like that's genuine. That is not pumped up for the documentary, and I hope that comes out. Like, I hope the Lillard stuff can clear up, and I hope that he can have the type of season we know he's capable of, because I think this guy, like, personality-wise, is just as much of a star as he is athletically.
The other one I would say is Ryan Turrell, because that his story is being someone who's trying to be coming from a D3 school and trying to be someone who's the first Orthodox Jew to play in the NBA. I think that's like such a inversion of the fish out of water story we get a lot in sports. And it's just so unique to him and to this league that I think that was the other one that I wanted to learn more about. And and he's done some press around this documentary as well. There's like a Rolling Stone story where he talked about it a little bit, but like in a way that we don't always think about, because I don't think we always do. He is someone that I'm sure is like to young like Orthodox Jewish kids, kind of someone they're like, okay, like if this guy can pursue his dream, like that is just such an interesting inversion of that kind of story, right? And I think that in itself is interesting. And I don't know what his like future holds, what the chances are, but it's a cool story, and it's cool that they got to kind of highlight that in a certain way.
Yeah, I was just impressed with the vulnerability that they were able to capture. Maybe it's because they're not the top of the top yet, or once were but aren't anymore, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of moments in this. I think the Gabe York and the Denzel Valentine.
The Denzel Valentine, yeah. The Denzel Valentine one, I think, is one of those things that really brings us together, because that's the one people know, but it's also like it's a good part of the G League story, that there's just guys like that who have been around and have made NBA money, but are still grinding for the chance to get back when they probably could go overseas and make more money if they really wanted to.
Yeah, it was crazy. They highlight that game of Mason Jones and the Capitanes, which I do want to talk about.
Yeah.
versus Scoot Henderson and Ignite, and I just went and Googled the box score because I was curious what that looked like. Kenneth Farid is on the Capitanes this year, as is there was a guard too that I'm now trying to find, Shabazz Napier. It's just crazy when you're kind of forced, but the Denzel Valentine thing was just so gut wrenching because it's like it just is a reminder that like he didn't pick to be overdrafted, and I think you and I have talked about this in a couple of other scenarios before of like it's not his fault that the NBA got carried away from him being at a blue blood, and I think he won National Player of the Year that year and everything else, and ends up being like a disappointment relative to what people thought he might be. Like that's not his fault, and then he gets kind of plopped into an uncomfortable situation where he's dealing with a bunch of pressure and just the idea that he disappointed somebody when he didn't. He just wasn't good enough to be in the NBA yet, and this might have been the path that he was always destined to take, but instead of doing it as the 50th pick, he did it as the 14th pick or whatever he was. So it brings a lot of that stuff to life in a way that just gets overlooked because you're right. Like I went to a G League game here up north in the woods area of Arizona, which is where our team used to be. We're getting another one soon, and it's like a high school gym. Like these stories are the epitome of overlooked, even though they're names we've heard of, and it's really cool. It's a really cool way to do it. What did you think of the Mexico City stuff, though? I thought it was intentional that the NBA, who is, I think, also a co-producer on this whole thing, chose to highlight that dynamic because it's a risk for them. It's one of only 2 NBA-operated franchises in the G League, along with Ignite.
I think it was really interesting. I think I still want to learn more about where this is going. I think that's part of this kind of intrigues me to learn more about where this Mexico City part of it is going. It's interesting. I don't think anyone really seemed overwhelmed by living there. Like I think it seemed like a lot of guys really enjoyed living there and had a good experience with it. There's a independent of this documentary. Mark Spears had a story about this several months ago as well. That was, I think, kind of emphasized some of those same points.
It was really good.
I'm very intrigued by this Mexico City stuff, and this year you have another. We'll see what the final roster looks like and stuff, but it's another year of like older NBA guys kind of pursuing it. It's kind of interesting. I think that those guys are on the forefront of doing this, right? Like it's not like I think it's probably intentional. They're not sending like 20-year-olds to Mexico City. Like they're sending kind of more established adults who can maybe navigate this a little bit better. Like it's Alfonso McKinney and Kenneth Farid and Mason Jones and
Alfonso McKinney. That's the other one I missed.
Yeah. Like you have guys
he was a DNP in the highlighted game, so his name wasn't on the list. But I did see that. And then it's a bunch of Mexican guys, which is cool, obviously too. For the crowd, the crowd was awesome. And it seemed pretty, like, I think they made reference to it being sold out at one point, or like he said something about how it was, really exciting to get to kind of be the star player on their team. I felt like Mason Jones could be in the NBA.
Yeah.
Like I was watching and I'm like 6'8" wing who can kind of defend and shoot. Like he seemed like the one that I was rooting for the most because it felt realistic. And then I ended up wanting him to like get a 2-way this year.
Well, now he's signed for a team who's I'm not even gonna DACA, which is the doc. I can't even express my ability to actually pronounce it correctly, but he signed to a team in Turkey. Like he has gone. Okay. It's like so he's gone overseas. I went and looked this up after the doc. I was like, okay, did he sign a 2-way? Was he on a summer league team or something? He's playing in Turkey next year for a team that goes by DACA for short. So that's in the basketball Super League in the Champions League over in Europe.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you, and it goes along with the Mexico City part, is the NBA wanting to put something like this together, buying the Capitanes franchise, choosing very distinctly to handle Ignite themselves. It feels like they want this to be looked at more and be something. Do you think we're there yet?
No, I don't think we're there with any of this until you start seeing some of these G League teams in other markets, I think, kind of have a little more cachet. I think one of the parts of the documentary that I would, this is maybe like a question worth asking, but I think Denzel Valentine would be like a great person to ask this about, or I think even Scoot. Some of these G League crowds are like they're not big, right? Like no. The Capitanes is like the one exception in a lot of ways. You go to a Motor City Cruise game or a Cleveland Charge game.
I mean, even the Victor versus Scoot showcase at the Ignite home arena was like empty.
Yeah. There is something very like weird about how I think it's very cool that like you go overseas and you have this product that they're developing there in that market, and there's clearly interest there. But I think the G League won't. I think the fact that like I would bet you your average NBA fan still has and I think this documentary could have a role in maybe dispelling some of those understandings. I think that would kind of be my hope if I'm the league. I think until you can get like a better, your average NBA fan can kind of better explain what the G League is, and B, some of these games feel like, some of these organizations and events feel like bigger deals that they can have better crowds for. And look, I would add that there are times that like Cleveland moved theirs from Canton to Cleveland. I think there are logistical reasons for that to make a lot of sense. But there's times where I think the Canton, Ohio crowds, because it was like a local thing, did better than like them being a mile down the street from Cleveland. I think there's something still to figure out with what you're doing with this as an actual basketball product that can get a lot of eyeballs on it. And I'm sure if you're someone who has played in front of a lot of crowds before, that part of this has to feel very, very weird.
Well, I think the part that you said that's right about what the NBA might be hoping for with something like this, or even to have the Ignite, which is much more of an Ignite thing than a G League thing, but even having them involved in the All-Star festivities and different ways that they're slowly trying to integrate it. I think that they had a G League All-Star team has done some stuff in the past. I think at Summer League they put a group together and things like that, is to get the athletes to attach less stigma to it. So I think you're totally right there, that it's like maybe the target audience in terms of acceptance is more of the athletes to look at it as something, even international players to look at it as more of an inroads to coming to the NBA than just toiling away on, the 8th man spot on their hometown team in whatever country they're from and things like that. But I think you're also totally right about the growth of the G League itself. When I think about minor league baseball, I agree. The small towns that don't get this stuff should be the targets. I understand that that's maybe even like baseball teams would prefer it not be that way, but baseball parks are pretty big and they don't always get their choice there. It's probably not fun to have to manage something that's out in the middle of the sticks, so to speak, but I think it really helps generate interest and generate excitement around the thing when it's the only show in town, so to speak, and people can really glom onto it. But I think the other part is if more stars or like signature prospects start to see it as something worth pursuing and committing to, then there will be actual talent to go watch instead of this guy you once heard of or that guy who might be something. It's like, Amani Bates is a great example. Hey, it's Amani Bates. This is where he plays. Buy a ticket.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But right now it's a bunch of names you forgot about or people you don't know yet. And that's what makes it a tough sell from like a business standpoint to generate interest. But if we see more guys take it seriously and you live in a city where there's not an NBA team or you can't afford to go to an NBA game, from a business standpoint, I think that's how it starts to kind of build, because minor league baseball is successful in some places, and I don't see why this couldn't be. The NBA seems to care about it a lot more than MLB cares about minor league baseball. Yeah,
at least from a labor perspective, at the very least. Yeah, I would want to see if there was like a bonus content on this, it'd be like, okay, what is it like for the Iowa Wolves in Des Moines, or like the Sioux Falls team? Like let's go to these areas. Like the Knicks team plays in freaking Westchester. Like they're not even in New York. Like they're outside. They're in the burbs of New York. Like I'm sure a lot of guys probably like commute in from the city or something. There's so many logistical parts of this story that I think will be really interesting to see. Or the fact that Denver's teams is it not in Michigan? If it's the Grand Rapids, I believe they're in.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
even the fact, right, that we haven't even had like the Suns sold there, so we're back to 29 going on 30. But Portland only just this year is going to finally have one. So like we are in the infancy of this thing, but I'm very curious what the NBA's plans are, and just the fact that they are moving forward in these strategic ways, coupled with, maybe the G League could be in the in-season tournament one day, and kind of that stuff being rumored around and everything else. It's like, you're running 30 basketball teams. It would be a waste not to care about it. So I'm glad they finally are. I just don't know what their plans are. I think this will go a long way to just showing people what it's really like, though. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Cannot recommend people check out this documentary enough if you're a basketball fan. If you're intrigued by the G League, it's really worth your time. And
there's real basketball in it.
Yes.
It's not just like a bunch of
there's like
sappy stuff.
It's
like, this guy's in the gym. What is that like for him? What's practice look like? What's the coaching look like? All that.
I guess this is maybe something we should have said off the top on this. This is the kind of documentary you would never get about an NBA team anymore.
Yeah.
Like the Portland Trailblazers are not going to willingly give this kind of access on Scoot's rookie year necessarily.
This is what happened when the NBA had a meeting. Like, could we do Hard Knocks? Could we do the all-in thing that Prime Video is doing? And then they were like, no, our players would never go for that. And then some intern was like, what if we did the G League? And then they all liked it, and it turned into something really good. But this is the closest you'll get from a basketball standpoint to any of that stuff, which is all great. I mean, we all love those types of things.
Do we think the players don't agree, or do we think it's PR teams freaking out about like the optics of it? Even though that's like. That's.
I think it's the PR teams and the team executives knowing that even if they brought their team into a show like that every NBA star would take how much of a fit Aaron Rodgers has been throwing about Hard Knocks covering the Jets this year and multiply that by 3, because NBA players are paranoid and do not like to be in the spotlight. And they're like, let's all make a great business decision to not even bother with that. But the access they got to these guys makes me okay with that. Like, I don't want 2% of coverage around Kevin Durant from what he wants us to see. I'll take like 150% on Scoot because it really worked.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, next up, we are talking to Liam Hughes and Bryant Robinson, the co-directors of Destination NBA. Again, check out this doc August 8th on Prime Video. Here's an interview with Liam and Bryant. We're thrilled to be joined now by Liam Hughes, the co-director of Destination NBA, a G League Odyssey, which premieres August 8th on Prime Video. Liam, thank you so much for coming on the Just Basketball Show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
So let Brendan, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, what I really want to know is just jumping off, like, we had a chance to watch the doc, and we're basketball nerds, and even just any Hoops fan's going to recognize a lot of the people, whether it's Scoot Henderson, who just got drafted 3rd overall, or the names and faces of alumni of the G League, or even some of the guys that might be kind of, I remember them from college and everything else. But what I'm curious to start off is just what your connection was to the G League, what your relationship was to the league and to the players in it kind of before the project, and then maybe what you learned or the biggest thing you came away thinking differently about with this group of guys and just the kind of organization of everything down there after finishing the project.
Yeah. Well, it's an easy answer in a lot of ways. I didn't have one. I didn't know much about the G League at all. I'm an NBA fan myself. I'm from the Bay Area, so shout out Warriors. But I didn't know much about the G League at all. And I think, honestly, that was a big part of the NBA's desire to do this project. The G League has been growing so much in terms of its quality, its reach, how connected it is to the NBA. But I don't think that people know about it. You know, it's like, it's one of those things where the quality and the size of the league has grown, but the knowledge about it and the access hasn't. And I think that was a big part of the reason that the NBA wanted to do this project. They felt like it was time for this league to get some shine. And we agreed, you know, once we started looking into it, the level of player that's there, like you said, the different types of players, the G League is now an alternative path to the NBA. You mentioned Scoot Henderson. It's a place where it is the premier place now where guys go that don't get drafted to the NBA, that classic path to the NBA, if you will. It is the premier place for guys to prove themselves, to test themselves, to develop as players, and to make it to the NBA. And so we learned that pretty quickly. And then we started thinking about, okay, like, what are the different archetypes of players that are in this league that we're seeing? You have your young phenoms like Scoot Henderson. You have your ex-college standouts like like Denzel Valentine. You have your hidden gems like Gabe York. And we really started to think about these different archetypes and the different type of guys that we were going to meet in the G League. And that's how we built our cast of subjects, if you will, was we really wanted to give a broad feeling for the type of guy that's playing in the G League.
When you get approached to do this, you guys take this on and you're saying, okay, I need to teach myself about this. I need to learn about this before I start maybe diving in. What was the process like of learning about this and learning about the G League and learning about what you were really diving into with this project?
Great question. I think that it began with, your kind of G League 101 education, right? I had no idea that there were so many teams. This past season, there were 28 teams, 28 affiliated teams of 30 NBA teams. This year, it will be 29 because the Portland Trailblazers just added their team, Rip City. The G League Ignite is an independent team run by the NBA. And then the Mexico City Capitanes are the first professional Mexican sports team to compete full-time in an American league. And all you had to do is tell me that. And I was like, whoa, okay. So let's go see a bit more about this. And I think that like the biggest thing that jumped out to me was how connected the leagues have become. I think the most obvious way is with the two-way contracts, that now every NBA team has two-way contracts, players that can play for both the NBA team and the G League affiliate. And also just how connected the teams are becoming. The Maine Celtics and the Boston Celtics, for example. Denzel Valentine talked a lot about how he did, he started with Boston preseason on E10, ended up with the Maine Celtics. And he's like, dude, organizationally across the board, we're doing things the same way in Maine as they're doing in Boston. And that's more and more common now. The NBA teams are looking at their G League teams as a place where we can develop players, we can develop coaches, and we can develop them to play in the system that we play in our NBA team. So if a player comes up here, they're not behind the count, they're not behind the eight ball. They know how we do things. They know what's expected of them because we run things the same over the course of our whole organization. So that was really interesting to see. This is a professional league. And when we talked to some of the guys, Spencer Dinwiddie, Seth Curry, guys who were in the G League when it was the D League, they were like, let me tell you something, right? This league has come a long way. So I think that became my second level of education, was talking to the guys who were there, 10 years ago, and what it looked like then versus what it looks like now. That's when it starts to become clear just how far this league has come.
One of the things for me in the doc that really stood out was how you guys blended a bunch of different backgrounds. You mentioned Denzel. There's someone in Mexico City. You have a player trying to become the first Orthodox Jewish player to play in the NBA. You have Scoot Henderson, who's this budding superstar. So what was it like trying to blend all these different stories from these very different backgrounds into one documentary, into one narrative, so to speak?
It was a challenge, one narrative with a limited amount of time, right? It started with kind of the structure. We knew we wanted to check in with each guy. We needed to introduce each guy. We wanted to check in with them throughout the season. But in some ways, there was no rhyme or reason to how we bounced between the players. It was really about developing their individual story arcs and then finding, what we really wanted to do was link these guys, right? We wanted to connect them through their common goal and their shared love of basketball, because they all have such different stories, they all have such different backgrounds, but they all have the same goal, which is to make it to the NBA. And that story plays out in the same place for all of them, which is on the basketball court. So what our big goal was to connect them through that shared goal and on the basketball court. So there are some instances where we were able to kind of transition between guys on the court. You saw that a lot more in kind of Act 1 when we were setting it up. So we really wanted to communicate that these guys are all on their own journeys, but they're also on the same journey, right? They all have the same destination in mind. They all have the same goal. And achieving that goal and reaching that promised land requires a lot of the same things, right? Commitment, resiliency, not giving up, obviously high skill level, continuing to develop. The same things are required of all of them to reach that place, but they all have such different and unique journeys in getting there. And I think that's what's so fascinating.
I have another question for you, but we actually have a surprise additional guest here, which is Bryant Robinson, the additional co-director of the wonderful documentary that we're discussing here, and one-upping all of us in terms of background. We were talking about yours, Liam, before we hit record, and Bryant is just outpacing all of us with that greenery and blue sky behind. We lost him momentarily, but I want to jump in, and he'll be back in a second. I want to just ask you, either of you guys, if Bryant, you want to jump in, it really hit me in the part where you hear different guys. I think somebody's getting stretched out or rolled out on the training table, and he jokes about, like, throws like the Giannis quote out there, and he's like, you got to, want to be the greatest to be the greatest, or something along those lines. And like, having spent a little bit of time around G League guys, and you kind of hear that, and it's like, as much as that was a joke, like, you do kind of catch that dynamic of, like, they're speaking about the NBA and in kind of this like aspirational way, and like they feel that proximity to it, but you also, in the doc, I think, did a great job of, it's like just out of reach, or like they're always kind of like it's one stair step away. I'm sure it jumped out to you guys when you started to interview these folks too, but how did you go about trying to capture that dynamic with the way that you structured things, or just kind of the moments you chose to capture from their personal lives and those behind the scenes things to kind of paint that picture of where they are in their careers and what this unique league is? Because it's not like the baseball minor leagues where it's like you're on your way to something no matter what. These guys, it is a big question of whether they'll get there.
That's a great clip.
Yeah, I mean, I think
the clip that you're referring to is I think was said by Mason Jones.
Yeah.
Who's actually one of my favorite characters in the movie. He's very polarizing, for lack of better words. He speaks his mind. He's never scared to say exactly how he feels, and that's why he was one of my favorite characters of the movie. I don't even know if I should say that. I mean, obviously we have Scoot. We have so many great guys. Denzel. Love them all for their own reasons. But, to answer your question, you just really have to form this relationship with these guys where they feel like they can trust you to even speak their minds. I think it just starts with trust. Finding out ways to allow these guys to just be themselves. Being on the court and being one of the best players in the G League is one aspect of things for these guys. They're used to cameras on the court, but having cameras in their bedrooms and having cameras in their living rooms is like a whole nother story. Like, imagine if we put a camera in your bedroom or in your story when you're exhausted. You just played the hardest game of the season so far, and now we have a camera in your room. You might want us to get out of there. You're right. Let alone talk about, how you feel and how far you might feel from the NBA, or how the game didn't go the way that you expected it to go. So I think it just starts with trust. Liam, I'm sure you have a lot to say there too about that question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, trust is everything, right? Trust is definitely everything when we're trying to get these guys to open up. I'll take a slightly different angle on the answer, though. Thinking about that moment, I think what he says is it's lonely at the top, right? But I think that it's a lonely journey for all these guys, and I think that that's something I definitely noticed, is that they're all fighting in the same arena. They're all fighting for the same goal. But it is really lonely. And I think especially in the G League, one thing we talked a lot about, and Gabe York, was very honest about it in the film, is that you're competing against your teammates in the G League, right? Like a G League title, they won't say no to it, but that's not the goal, right? You go into a G League season as a G Leaguer, your goal is to get an NBA contract and get to the NBA. And that's the goal of every guy on the team. So you're playing together. You're trying to beat the other team. You're trying to win the championship, but you're also competing against your teammates to be the one who gets the 2-way or the 10-day. So it's kind of like, it's very lonely, I think, for these guys. Someone like Scoot, with the amount of attention that he gets at 18, like nobody can relate to that. It's lonely. And I think that that's in some ways what Mason was getting at in that moment, obviously in a very Mason way. But that was something that I really wanted us to capture it. And in general with professional athletes, like it's something that's glamorized from the outside, but once you get inside of it, it's really not that glamorous a lot of times. It's really hard work. It's a really tough mental struggle day to day. And that's something that I think is super important to portray in these sports docs.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, I think the longer shots and the darker kind of lighting and everything, I could feel that was kind of what was trying to come across. I mean, the thing you talked about Mason and liking him as a character, I the line that jumped out to me the most from this standpoint was also his, which was the honesty about being on the Rockets that first year and feeling like wanting to get better and almost like asking too many questions and like pushing too hard was what like cost him that shot. That was kind of crazy because you would just think like that's what a coach would want. I could totally imagine being in his shoes and being like, let me go ask coach what I need to work on, or let me kind of get to the front of the line for this drill or whatever. And then to hear him kind of say like, I think that was the problem. Like that just hit me. I mean, I don't know if you guys have any specific thoughts, but I just, it was impactful to me.
I feel like these documentaries are therapeutic for these athletes, to some degree. So I feel like what I'd be interested in the most after this is that, after this movie comes out on August 8th is I'd love to watch it with these guys and see how they receive the film themselves, because he, to your point of, Mason says that he asks too many questions. Like, what does that actually mean? And that's something that I think Liam and I both wrestled with. Like, what does that actually mean? And I think over time, and being able to spend more time with Mason, I think what I'll speak for myself. Like what I personally realized was that what I think that means is that maybe he was a little bit actually more of a hothead and than he should have been about, the things that he wanted to get out of the NBA. These guys who are coming from the G League and entering the NBA are, they're coming with this level of aggression and they've worked so hard that once they get there, they're kind of anxious. They want to stay there, one thing that I realized about Mason, one thing I picked up about him is that he's so passionate that sometimes that passion actually translates into, he can easily come off as too aggressive. And I think I would imagine, and, I could be wrong, but I could imagine him asking some of these questions to his coach in a very like overly passionate way, and maybe that has a little bit more to do with it. But I don't know, man, that your question is actually why I'm so excited about this movie to come out. I want to see how these guys receive the film, and hopefully we get a season part two to this entire movie, because I'd love to just continue to like understand and explore these characters' minds and get deeper and deeper with them. We spent 6 or 7 months with these guys. It's very hard to get extremely deep with someone in that short amount of time. I think we did a really great job with revealing a lot of layers to these guys, but there's always more work to be done. So that's my answer to that one.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I would love it if we could. I mean, the same guys, new guys. Like I even think of Chris being based in Cleveland and Imani Bates, somebody like that who is going to probably be starting their career. There's so many different types of career checkpoints that happen in the G League. But I wanted to ask you about Scoot Henderson because I'm sure a lot of NBA fans will be tuning in to hear and see more about him. He's somebody who's going to get a lot more admirers as his career begins this year in Portland. What's something you saw just being around Scoot that might not be obvious to the average NBA fan who's just getting to know him or maybe just heard of him in June for the first time?
But so let's just start with a photo of Scoot Henderson. What does he look like? He looks like a god of an athlete. This guy's huge, I mean, at least to me, when I'm standing next to this guy, even in person, I just look at him and I think, wow, this guy is, I'm looking at a 36-year-old man who's just been lifting weights his whole life. But then you meet him and you speak to him and you listen to him and you really, get pulled back to reality, which is that this guy is, 18, 19 years old. And I think that's something that comes across in the film. You really get to see how, at the end of the day, outside of all the cameras, lights, and action around this guy, he's just a kid, and he's coming into himself as a man, and I think that's something that people just wouldn't be able to get unless they saw the film or unless they were friends with Scoot. You wouldn't be able to understand that he has, this like very pure, innocent child, like younger personality and way of seeing things, and there's a lot of things that are still foreign and new to him. He's obviously a superstar and he's built and he's ready for the league, but things like finding his voice and leadership are things that I think that he's continuing to develop.
Yeah.
Well,
and I would say another thing that that really jumped out for me about Scoot is just how important his family is to him and his success and his growth. And I think across the board with these guys, the support systems they have are so important. We meet Gabe's girlfriend in the series. In the film, we meet Ryan Turrell's family. We meet Scoot's family, Mason's girlfriend. I mean, all these guys really rely on their support networks, and I think that that's especially true of Scoot and his family. I mean, if you watch the draft, you saw them doing a photo. The Henderson 7, they have a sign for the 7 kids and stuff. Like, they're so deeply connected. And obviously his dad was a big part of training him growing up, and that's so important to them. And then I think the other thing that I would say, and this kind of ties back to your last question as well, is a common theme that comes up again and again is these guys, they all say, control what you can control what you can control. I'm just going to control what I can control. And I think that's, for a guy like Scoot, who has such high expectations, right, awaiting him, the weight of the world on his shoulders as he enters adulthood at the ripe age of 18, like, it's an incredible amount of pressure. But I think that mindset of, I'm just going to control what I can control, which is get up, go to the gym, train, listen to my coaches, take care of my nutrition, take care of my health, go to bed, wake up, repeat. Like, that's so important to his mentality. And I think so important to a lot of these guys. And I think it was a big part of Mason's lesson, right? Again, tying back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, he's like, control what you can control. Now, that's what I've learned is don't ask questions, work hard and prove it. It's like actions speak louder than words, right? It kind of comes back to that. So, but Scoot is so impressive. He's just such an impressive young man.
He is.
Yeah. Let's end on one last question. Was there something in this documentary from either of you that didn't make the final cut that you wish would have, that it stuck in your brain for whatever reason? Is there something that ended up on the cutting room floor that it stuck with you, even if maybe the viewer is not going to get to see that in the final product?
Yeah, there. I can go first. I won't say the exact line of what. Liam, you go first. There's so many things that I can think of. So I want to hear, Liam, what you think first.
Well, I think that I think that I'll give it's kind of a broad answer, but our biggest challenge was kind of narrowing down the field here, in terms of how many guys we were able to feature, and what we ended up doing, is we have our 5 main guys, and then each of them kind of has an ancillary subject, as we were calling it, that helps us better understand the main subject journey, right? So whether that's Ryan Turrell's parents, who kind of represent his higher purpose and helped us understand his impact in the Orthodox Jewish community, whether it was Trevelyan Queen for Gabe, who kind of represents the guy who he's competing with, whether it was Pooh being the mentor and mentee relationship with Scoot. But we have so much more content with Pooh, with Fiondu Kabengele in Maine, with Trevelyan Queen, with Pooh Jetter, that we just didn't have space for, So I think really that's that would be my answer, is like, it's whole characters that I really wish we could have dug into more, because I mean, you see how amazing these 5 guys' stories are. We could have done that with 4 more guys, So
I think
it's like,
Pooh could
that
have
was,
a documentary about him by himself.
Yeah.
Pooh is you said character as like a movie character, but Pooh is a character like a person character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Bryant?
Okay, so there's a scene with Fee Cabangeli when he's sitting in his hotel room, and his hotel room is essentially I'm sorry, his apartment room is essentially a small hotel room. And if you know anything about Fee Cabangeli, you know that this guy is a giant of a human.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how tall he is, but we can look it up. But he's extremely tall. He's extremely wide. We're spending some time with him in his room, and he's sitting on this couch, and he's making this like long couch look like a foldable armchair. That's how big this guy is. And when he stands up, when he stands up, I kid you not, he's about 3 inches away from his head is 3 inches away from touching the ceiling of his room. And we're all in this room. Some of us get out of the room because it's not a lot of space, not a lot of oxygen in this room, and we're trying to like save it so that we can actually like film this good, competent interview, without sweating profusely and without having to like cut it short because of lack of oxygen, literally. And I asked him about this room, and I'm expecting him to complain about this room and talk about how he just can't wait to get out of it so that he can get into the NBA and make all this money and buy this mansion and buy this house, buy these cars and all this stuff. So I asked him about the room, and he looks at me, and with the biggest smile on his face, he goes, "I love it here. I love it. I love it here." And I'm like, "What? Why do you love it here? Like we're in hell." And he's like, "No, we're not actually." He goes, "The reason why I love it here is because no matter how far I get in life, this being in this room is always going to ground me, and it's always going to remind me of how far I've come. And I'm always going to look back to this moment where I was an inch away from the ceiling, and I'm going to just be thankful. And it just reminds me that the grind never stops. And no matter how far I get, there's always going to be someone like me in this room grinding just as hard as I thought I needed to grind to be wherever I get to. So I need to remember that so that I always have that motivation to continue to grind as hard as I possibly can." And just his perspective on this room. I mean, I wish I could send you a photo of how small this room was. It just blew me away. And that, that basically shows you guys just how great this film, whoever's reading or listening, that basically shows you how great of a film this actually is, because if that scene got left on the cutting room floor, like just imagine what's actually in the movie.
Yeah. Guys,
I'll give you a fun one as well.
Yeah.
I'll give you a fun one as well.
Yeah.
There was one moment where we were talking to Scoot, and he was saying something to his mom about maybe something that the first lady had said, and she goes, "No politics, bro. Come on, no politics." And we ended up leaving that one on the cutting room floor. But I just thought that was kind of funny, like knowing the minefield that this kid is walking into as just a famous professional athlete. To hear his mom be like, hey, let's not talk.
Yeah,
about
don't
politics,
even say the word first lady. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let's just avoid all of that. Yeah. I'm gonna ask you off air what I think that might have been about, and we'll see if I'm right or not. All right, thank you guys so much for coming on. I have a guess based. There's a basketball related thing to that I have a guess of what that might have been, but I don't know when you guys were working on this, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But again, you guys can check out Destination NBA: A G League Odyssey, directed by these two wonderful gentlemen. It premieres on Prime Video on August 8th. Thank you guys so much for coming on the Just Basketball Show to talk all about it.
Thanks for having us.